Yo, this hot, this the spot, there it is, pod.com. We're interviewing the best comedians, so tune in quick and get your ears receiving them. We talking about life and life to stream right to you, from the microphone right to your home, dude. Side note, this might get embarrassing, but no, don't sweat, yo, cause there it is.
Welcome to the There It Is podcast, America's podcast where we talk to interesting people to help you find your inspiration. I'm your host, Jason Farr. Let's do this. It's a mouthful. Maybe we'll have to go to the condensed one. Nevertheless, thank you for joining us. We have a great guest today. It's stand-up comedian and writer Monica Nevi, a.k.a. Monica Nevi Ending Story. Okay, I stole that from her co-host, but it's pretty good. Should check her out on the Hug Life podcast if you haven't already. If you are here because you know about Monica and her podcasts and her work, thank you for joining us and spreading the love this way. We have a ton of old episodes that you can get on Apple Podcasts and Amazon and Google and Stitcher and SoundCloud and iHeartRadio. I think they have it up on there because they just aggregate it all. So I didn't even have to do anything. And it's there. So go check that out over there if you want, if that's how you like listening to us. We also put old episodes up on YouTube on Thursdays and enhanced episodes on the weekends. And those enhanced episodes, they're done by brother of the show, Trey, and they're of the most recent episode of the podcast. And he'll add some stuff in there. Like last week's episode, just check out the YouTube version of that. Unless you just like listening to stuff while you're driving or working. But at this point, these enhanced episodes on YouTube are kind of better to listen to just because they have that extra info. Like whatever is being referenced, you can see it right there because Trey will put it into the episode. So it's very cool. Go check that out. youtube.com/thereitis. Speaking of new episodes, let's get to today's. It's very fun. She is a Seattle-based stand-up comedian, and she does a lot of cool stuff. Here's my chat with Monica Nevi. Said, hey. She doesn't know you. She just told me to tell you, hey.
Okay. Well, hey, Justina.
So are you born and raised in Washington State?
I am. Yeah, I was born and raised in Renton, Washington, which is about 20 minutes south of Seattle, if you don't know. Went to school at Seattle University, played basketball there, and then a little bit after that, I moved to Los Angeles for 3 years, but it was mostly me still traveling, being on the road. So there was a year where I didn't live anywhere and was just on the road all the time. And then I came back to the great Northwest. Nice. About 8 months before COVID hit anyway. So
oh wow.
Yeah,
wow.
It kind of ended up.
You got back before like where you're close to family. So
yeah.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, it feels like some people did that after out of necessity, but I was just ahead of the curve, Yeah.
That's a good way for a comic to be. You mentioned you played basketball in college and that career ended in college because of an injury, right?
Yes. Yeah, it did. Thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That must have been traumatic.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was my whole life. I started playing when I was 6. And so I identified as a basketball player. That was who I was, which maybe wasn't that healthy, but still it was, such a big part. And then all of a sudden it was gone. And it was about 8 months after that. Yeah. Point guard. I'm taller than most women, but I'm not that tall when it comes to basketball. So I don't
interesting. So what is it, like 5'9"?
I'm 5'7".
That was gonna be my second.
Yeah, which is funny because I don't it never really hits me until I'm around normal sized people. Like when I'm with teammates, they're all 6 foot and above. Yeah. And I'm the small one. And then I'm around the average size woman is like 5'2", which is crazy. But
right. 5'7"'s a good height. I mean, maybe not for basketball. I don't know.
Right. I wish there was a couple more inches, but that's okay.
Yeah, for that. Yeah, when people get into college for basketball, it's something that they really have devoted all of their time to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not surprised that it was something that you were looking at as like, I'm a basketball player. That's who I am.
Well,
That's
and
my
then to
identity.
not really have made the decision myself, it was because of
Yeah.
injuries too. So it's kind of taken from you. But, I stayed with the team and my degree's in sports and exercise science. So I actually
Okay.
interned with them and whatnot. So it worked out that way. And
Yeah,
now,
that's good.
what's it been almost 12 years? I wouldn't trade it or the experience or the people that I met for anything, but it was more difficult at the time for sure.
Of course, for sure. And I was gonna say you must have had a lot more time in your hand, but since you stayed involved with the team, you still had a lot of time with the team.
Yeah, I would say I had less time. So
Mm,
it was at the end of my sophomore year that I had to, I guess, retire now that you think about it. But
mhm.
um, so then midway through my junior year was when I started stand up. So at that time, I was still going to school. I was with the team, which is practicing twice a day or traveling or games, whatever, depending on what time of the season. I had another job.
Mhm.
And then I was also doing stand up at that time,
Yeah.
probably 2 to 3 nights a week. So it was, yeah,
Busy, busy.
it was a lot for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I was wondering I when I just heard originally when I was researching that you had an injury and that was when you started stand up, I kind of assumed like, well, I guess you needed to fill all that time that athletes you know spend that was suddenly
Yeah.
free. But you were you were just doing a bunch of things on top
Yeah.
of it.
Did more.
Wild, wild. What job were you working?
I worked at a place. I don't know if I should say what it's called, but it's like a trampoline facility. You've seen
Okay.
those like where you can
Yeah,
go in
yeah,
and jump on the
yeah.
trampoline, play dodgeball and stuff like that. Yeah, I was
Uh-huh.
working there and hated it. Oh man, I hated
Yeah.
it. It was rough, but I was there for like 2.5 years or whatever.
Yeah.
That's kind of my move usually. I'm like, I have a problem with this, but let me stick it out for way too long.
Well, so like you're not even working as an RA and making money that way. I mean, it was off campus. Yeah,
Hmm.
you really were spreading yourself thin. Or maybe you just have a capacity more than the average person because
I
athletes
don't.
tend to.
Maybe just the because everything was very structured for us,
Hmm.
because even when when I couldn't play anymore, I was still with the team, but I didn't have all of the same, like if they had to go to study hall and stuff like that, like I didn't have to do that part. So there was a bit less structure, and maybe I was just like, okay, well, I have to fill that with something. I mean, also I needed money. It was kind of
Hmm.
a
Yeah.
necessity on that part.
Hmm.
But now, because now within maybe the last 3 years, I have been so full time stand up that there's no freelance writing, there's no whatever else. It's just been stand up. And then I feel like I'm not doing enough. Like I do,
Yeah.
like I feel, even though I'm traveling a lot and
Hmm.
things like that, I still feel like it's not enough. And maybe it comes from that where it's like you had all these things that you
Right.
were supposed to be doing. So then, now I have podcasts and
Right.
YouTube and whatever else, because I feel like I need to fill that time. Or,
Right.
I mean, I still like to make other things, but
Yeah.
I've only ever had more than one job at a time or been going to school and working and so
No, I remember that grind when I was in college because I was doing extracurricular things and was an RA, and then there's school.
yeah.
And at my
Yeah, you forget
particular
the school
school,
part. Yeah.
that was very easy at my college because I felt like the RAs, I don't know if it was partly just because we wanted to do a lot or if we were required to do a lot, but we did a lot with that to the point that a couple of RAs were like, "School? What's that?" So it was something that I got really accustomed to and liked doing all of these different things. And yeah, when you're not doing as much stuff, you can feel like you're not doing enough.
Right.
But the truth is, maybe we were doing too much
Yeah.
because I definitely burn out by the end of my college career with doing all that stuff. So originally, I assume because of your degree, and doing basketball, your idea at the time was to graduate and go into athletics to some degree. What
Yeah.
was the plan once you started doing comedy? Was it then, okay, well, maybe I'll just make a go of this, or were you thinking of doing a hybrid thing? What was the idea?
Um, I think there was moments when I thought about doing a hybrid thing. Um, I was okay. So I eventually got so irritated with the trampoline job that I moved back to. I had worked in like youth development before that with like YMCA's and stuff like that, and so I went back and worked for a Boys and Girls Club for a while. And there was moments there because I was graduating, and then where I thought maybe I should be an athletic director at a Boys and Girls Club because there was some people in the leadership of that realm that I really liked. And so I was like, okay, maybe I can do that. But my bosses didn't really, or one of my bosses didn't really care what I wanted to do. You know, I think she wanted me to move into a director position because I was an assistant director. And she was like, you should take these other classes and do this. And I was like, I don't want to do that. Like, even if I wasn't gonna, you know, my goal was always to do stand up full time at that point. And so if I was going to do that, I didn't even want to stay where I was, but she didn't care to ask. So there was definitely, I'd still say like now if stand up wasn't, I didn't do anything with comedy, I would coach. I could see that, but, yeah, that was kind of I think coaching, or I mean, a lot of my classmates went into like physical therapy and stuff, but I wasn't ever really interested in the injury side of things, maybe because I did get injured.
Right.
But yeah, and then so like exercise testing was always really interesting to me, and like exercise physiology. So the lab that we worked through in college, they tested like the U.S. Rugby team and stuff like that. That was always really interesting to me, just because once you get to those elite levels of athletes, the little tiny tweaks make such a big difference that a lot of them get tested for a lot of stuff, their VO2 max and their muscle fiber types and all that stuff. So that stuff's pretty interesting. And I could see myself either coaching or doing that stuff. But now the only combination would be, you know, talking about basketball. So
yeah, maybe it's another podcast that you can
there you go.
bring into the fold, a comedic take on basketball. So you did comedy, you did stand up a good couple of years while you were still in college.
Yeah, so a year and a half, and then I actually ended up having to take one extra class after. So yeah, it's probably 2 years that I was still in school, finishing the degree while I was doing stand up. Yeah, I was 20, just a little bit before I turned 21 is when I first started stand up.
Interesting. What was the scene like? Because I was not around a scene that had a bunch of college kids or any college kids. So I imagine you might have been the only one.
That's interesting. You know, I never really thought about that. There was a few other younger people that I know started around my same time, but that wasn't who I was like friends with, you know, in comedy. There was always older people who had been doing it for a little bit. There's this weird thing, you know, when you first start something, I think they just shifted into the not open micer. So they're like, oh, I can be an asset now. I've done this. I can help you. And so you're like, oh, they know what they're talking about because they've been doing it for a long time, when really in the grand scheme of things, it's not really that long. But yeah, I mean, I used a fake ID the first few months which I really didn't have to, it turned out, but whatever. Also, it had a different name on it than I used on stage. Like, I didn't really think about it very well. But so it was an interesting shift to go from being around athletes all the time that were mostly my same age to people who were older than me that were spending every night in a bar, essentially. So, yeah, it is kind of a weird thing to do now that I think about it. But
and maybe even the discipline was very different. I mean, you're at an open mic, so you have people who are hoping to get into it professionally, and then people who are just doing it for fun.
yeah,
And out of the people who even want to become professionals, a lot of them don't have a lot of discipline. I mean,
That's true.
that's part of the world of stand-up. We want to fall into it backwards, right?
Yeah, definitely. It is I've talked about that quite a bit just because I was used to the athlete mindset. Like
Right,
even if you weren't the best, you were working hard to get there,
right.
and I played a team sport too. So it was a lot of people going for the same goal. And,
Hmm.
we, for the most part, were supportive of each other because you're only as good as your weakest player, those types of
Hmm.
things. I mean, I could spout off coach quotes for hours, but it's not like that in stand up, obviously.
No.
You're right. People are doing it for different reasons. Some people do want to make it their career. Some people it's just for fun, or it's for fun and they don't know it yet. uh, and then there's a competition level a
Hmm.
bit where you're competing with each other, even though you don't mean to sometimes.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and I do feel like even now that I've been doing stand up for 10 and a half years. Um, I haven't really felt anything like being on a team like that. I've never, just because it's adversity, it's uncomfortable, it's hard work, but you're all doing it together, and
Hmm.
that doesn't really, and you have similar mindsets. I've gotten in trouble a few times in stand up where I'm just like, I just work harder. Why are you complaining? Just do this. Um, and that's not what some people want to hear, or not what works for them. And I have
Hmm.
to like reel it in a little bit just because I'm used to coaches, yelling at me
Right.
or whatever.
Well, also, there's maybe something a little more specific in sports that people can work harder at, because you can always work harder in the gym, I guess,
Right. Yep.
and in different ways. But when it's stand up, it's like, well, you write your jokes and then you hone your jokes and then you go tell your jokes. So
Yeah.
where's the clear play? And it's also an art form, so it's kind of like, you know,
Subjective. There's
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's hard to. It's very case by case. There's
Yeah.
certain people. It's like, here's where I see this person can work on honing, but someone else will have a completely different thing that they need to maybe work on.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, if you're off shooting, you go in the gym and you shoot more, if
Right.
you like, I mean, I guess hypothetically you could practice your jokes alone, but that's just it's not the same,
Not the
I mean, I
same.
get it.
You
I
can't
don't know.
ever get it out the same. It's just
Yeah,
the
there's
adrenaline
some
changes
things,
it. Yeah.
some things overlap, but a lot of things don't. So I'm still learning that, I think.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's also, I mean, I guess also in basketball or sports, you have a championship. You can put, like, we are trying to get to the championship. Like, what's
Yeah.
the championship if you're in an open mic? Like, I don't.
Yeah, or even, I mean, even just stand up, it's like, because my
Mhm.
championship could be different than
Yeah.
someone else's, if they want a Netflix special, but I want a late night set, whatever it is. Like
Right.
those are different things. Maybe I should think about it as seasons. That would be helpful for me.
Yeah. 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 I mean, there's got to be a helpful way for everyone to figure out how they can hone strong, like, just get stronger. Um, but also not drive themselves crazy on a fool's errand to a
Yeah.
certain
And
degree.
yep. No, I agree.
No, it's interesting. It's interesting. I'll have to ruminate on that a little more. So when did you start getting gigs, and when did it stop becoming just like you mentioned that some people had moved past that just an open micer sort of vibe or stage? When did that happen for you?
um, I don't know if I actually moved past that stage, or if I was just like had told myself like this is what I was going to do, but that probably, I would say, like 2 years in,
Hmm.
because I had quit the not quit, but left the trampoline place to go and work at the Boys and Girls Club because I could have nights, like we closed at 6, so I could go out and do more. So I was making choices that would facilitate me being able to do more stand up. And
Hmm.
then at that point, I just, even my frustrations with that job were like, okay, it's a means to an ends. I'm just figuring out how to. And then, yeah, I was like 3 years in that I had decided to quit and go on tour for a really long time. But then I got in trouble and had to stay for, I got a DUI.
I see.
And so had to stay for another year. And then after that, I went and did that. I went on tour for 3 months. And then at the end of the 3 months, that's when I moved to Los Angeles. So it was about 4 years in that I made it full time. And it was real touch and go there for a while. But
Yeah.
after those 2 years was when I decided that's what I wanted to do. So I started saving a lot of money, which helped me stay in Los Angeles for at least that first year.
Yeah.
Wasn't as lucrative as I had been on the road. And then I just started doing more road stuff, whatever. I'm figuring it all out. But
Right.
yeah, so probably after 2 years, I was like, okay, I'm really going to try and make this my career.
When you were in LA, what was the approach to comedy there? I mean, you had gone from being in, I guess, sort of a college town, maybe doing bar gigs, but was there a devoted club while you were in college or right out of college
Yeah.
before you moved to LA?
Yeah, there was a few. I was lucky enough to start in a bigger city. It wasn't necessarily the biggest of the cities, but Seattle's pretty big. And so there was, I think, 4 clubs at the time. And then there was like this alt scene. So there was a lot of stage time. And by that point, people really liked me. So I worked a lot. I was in at all those clubs.
Got
and then
to open
go
for a lot of names, I bet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Got to meet some people that were in those cities in New York and LA or whatever. And then LA is its own beast, of course. It's something different. And that's more of a confusion as far as like the if you're at an open mic, you're like, who's here because they're just started? Who's here because they've been doing it for a long time? Who's here because their agent told them they should try it? Like there's all these different things to mix in and you're like, I don't even know. Then you got to buy a drink so you can put the receipt into the bucket and hopefully get picked earlier than if you just sign up, like all these things. And so eventually I started only going to open mics that I knew the host, because then they would just pretend to pull my name out of the bucket, which is maybe a secret I shouldn't tell people. But because otherwise sometimes you sit there and then they never call you and you're like, why did I
never call you?
Sit at the Improv for 3 hours and then not, and then I'm spending money because I'm sitting here. So I'm probably going to buy a drink or whatever. And it was a mess. So then I started to just go on the road more from there. And I felt like that was and starting to work different places than I would, Arizona and San Diego and Northern California and places that I hadn't yet because I lived in Washington. And, I had kind of done all the Washington, Idaho, Montana, Oregon, those places that were reachable for me. And I'd done, the long tour. So I'd been plenty of other places, but really getting in with some of the California stuff. And that was kind of my focus. And that's where I do think I sound like an old road guy when I say this, but I do think that's where you really get funny. Like you really learn how to, I guess,
play
predict
different rooms.
Yeah, different audiences and know what's going to work and figure out something that works everywhere. If I can do some jokes in LA and also in Albuquerque, it's that's a good one.
Right. If it can hit anywhere, then that's definitely a material.
Yeah. So I kind of went that route. Right. And a lot of people I knew in LA kind of went the other way, where they did way less stand-up and just were doing auditions and stuff like that a lot, which that wasn't ever what I started for. Now there's a diverse collection of things that I've done, but that wasn't ever the goal. And like it was always stand-up. I always wanted to do stand-up. That's still my goal. Like I like all these other things, but it's so that people can see it and go, oh, I like her. I would go see her live. That's just what I want it to function as. And so, a lot of people just stayed there, got day jobs, and then wanted to try to either write for shows or act or whatever. And a lot of them did that, which was great.
Yeah.
But there's just different, you just make it your own. Okay.
Yeah.
And it'll change constantly.
Absolutely.
You just figure it out.
I mean, that's why I've always hated this, but as time goes on, I hate it more, that infamous line of Bill Hicks of you're not really a comic and if you're doing anything outside of stand-up. And it's like, that is just not the world that anyone lives in.
Not now, no. Yeah.
I mean, he definitely, if he hadn't have died, he definitely would have ended up on a guest spot on sitcoms or something like that.
He would have been on Friends and everybody would have been pissed about it.
He would have done something. I mean, I just kind of hate the way some comics will throw that in your face. Like, dude, like who is doing just one thing? You're like Chappelle was in A Star Is Born. You know, like, are you telling me he's not a real stand-up Dave fucking Chappelle because he did a sketch show?
Right.
That's so ridiculous to say.
Well, and that's what his career isn't anywhere near his career if he doesn't do that sketch show, you know? So it's like,
absolutely. You know?
What are you talking about? Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah. It just changes. And I think money plays a lot into it too. And back then it was like you go to a club and now they know your name. And then next time you're there, they come and see you again. There wasn't like, oh, now I'm going to go find him on social media and watch these other things and do this special, you know, whatever. But that's how it is now. That's really important. And because there was like 2 things, late night and an HBO special, you know,
right.
And now there's a million things. So
yeah,
it just changes constantly. And I think you have to be adaptable.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Just like when you're on stage, you know, if somebody starts yelling at you or is drunk or whatever, you got to adapt to that too. So your whole life and career have to be the same.
Yeah. The impetus to start going on the road was obviously going to be because it was the next natural thing to do if you want to have a career as a stand-up. How did you go about doing that, making that launch?
I think it was kind of a slow burn, which is how I describe myself anyways. But I started doing, well, honestly, when you first start, if you have a car, it is very helpful to get road gigs. I think the first time I worked at a club that wasn't a local club was that a headliner just needed a ride. So I featured for him because I could drive him there. And so I kind of started doing things like that where I would just go with certain headliners that I knew that liked me. And then you like it. I don't even when it's bad, it's fun. And, you know, now sometimes I get a little tired, but I still like going to new places and having an audience that hasn't seen me or has been waiting to see me. And they're surprised. It's this great thing instead of, you know, the same crowd that comes and sees me here and they're like, oh, I've heard half of this, but not the other half, you know, it's a little less, but it's just, it was like that fun. So I did like a few, just had been asked to go with people. And then from there would, you know, kind of go back to those same venues if the person who ran the show liked me or whatever. And so, after that 4 years, then I was like, okay, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to go and do as much in a row as I can. And that was honestly so much work to book all of that because you go through some of the channels you've already had. Then you go, okay, I got to ask these people who live there that I worked with here, I did this festival with, and ask them what good shows there are. Then I have to reach out to that person, use their name, hope that they like me enough to be like, yeah, we'll book you. Even though like at the time, so it was like a co-headlining tour, it, you know, mostly bar shows and stuff. And it was good, but it wasn't, you know, now I'm like so comfortable with time and like, oh, sure, I'll do an hour or whatever, you know, then I'm like still pushing myself to get to 30 minutes and whatnot. And so it was, I think stand up and figuring it out as a career is a lot of making choices that you probably shouldn't and just doing it anyways. And somebody asks you to come and do an hour and you feel like you only have 40 minutes, do it anyway, see what happens, you know, push yourself a little bit. So that was a lot of that. I mean, I made that choice to do the tour, booked it for me and another person, pretty much myself. It was 3 months long where we worked most nights and I made it work financially. My partner's not as smart as I with money, so it was a little rough for him, but it was great. It was fun. And now, you know, sometimes now, even though I'm a more settled person and I have a stable family life. I still sometimes fantasize like, what if I did just go on the road for 4 months?
Yeah, that's the tough thing that stand-ups and musicians have to think about, right? Of how tough that is, and then if you're on the road a lot, I mean, musicians have to go on the road.
Yeah, and stay there. I feel like they
Yeah,
go for like a long time.
a long time. Stand-ups maybe can say like, well, I'm gonna do this stuff in this town. I can hit the clubs in this town and make the money I want. But I mean, if the labels are gonna make you. If you're a musician, they're gonna make you tour.
Yeah.
And what gets to be weird is coming home. Getting
Right.
used to being home with your loved ones and not cramped on a bus with random.
Yeah.
Not
I
random,
had
a bunch of dudes.
said, up until COVID, basically, that I felt most comfortable in a hotel. And I don't think that's healthy, but that was like the best sleep I had. And like, I was like, I knew I could lock the door and all that, because that's where I was most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. That adjustment, what are things that you think stand-ups can do when they are coming from the road and back to home life for a little bit? What are some adjustments that people can make?
When you get back, that's questionable. I think making some sort of routine that you can have doing both is really helpful and helped me during some pretty tough, like lonely times where, I try to wake up at the same time, or write right away, meditate, whatever you do, work out. And then when you're home, also do those same things because then just less is changing at once.
Yeah.
And when you travel, every week, because for a while I was continuously on the road, but then even before I had a family, that became too much. And so it was like, okay, I'd rather go and come back and change what my schedule is like a little bit. But then that's almost worse as far as routine goes. Cause if you're like, well, 3 days a week, then I do my home routine. And then 4 days a week, I do my road routine. And you're like, well, those things should just be the same so that you're at least having some sort of constant. And then the eating, I think, is pretty important.
Yeah.
Those things, if you could try and eat, I don't know. Because I mean, my degree's in sports and exercise science. I know a lot about the body. And even as athletes, what they would be like, oh, if you just eat, you'll feel different without working out harder or doing anything. You'll feel lighter if you eat this stuff and you'll, whatever. It's true just in life. And like, I just feel better if I can figure out how to eat appropriately. It is not easy on the road, especially depending on where you're traveling. But
right.
Those things,
fast
like,
food
just
is so easy, and they don't have a lot of healthy options.
well, that, and also like dependent, like, I was just in Wichita and Tulsa, and vegetables not popular there. Not fans of vegetables. Great meat. I had some really nice meat dishes, but not a whole lot of vegetables.
Mac and cheese was a vegetable.
Was the side, yeah, for sure. So you just kind of try to make it work, but just like normal human things.
Yeah, and
are
also
important.
if you're playing a bar show, it's like, oh, we'll feed you, and it's like they're not gonna have a salad. They're gonna have chicken wings, and those chicken wings are gonna look good.
And that's going to be your best option still, because everything else is a grilled sandwich or whatever. Yeah, for sure.
Right. You mentioned a minute ago that when you were playing the rooms that were home for you at the time, the audience would maybe know half of the jokes. And that is a struggle as a stand-up to do jokes that this audience, if it's your regular room, has heard. But you got to keep doing them because you got to kind of keep them warm. You can't just say like, all right, I know how that goes. Because when I have taken a long time off from doing a joke and was like, oh, I'll throw this one in there, I know how it goes. I forgot a couple of beats, so you kind of have to regularly do it.
Oh, yeah. And coming back from this, we did a lot of Zoom shows and try to make it work virtually and shorter sets. And I like new, I get tired of hearing old stuff. And I recorded an album right before COVID and it came out in the middle of it. And so normally you put it out and you're like, oh, I'm still going to be doing some of this and trying to get new stuff, whatever. But I had about like 20 new minutes of material since all of this had started that I'm like really excited about. I enjoy doing. And then they're like, okay, we're live again. And you're going to do 45 minutes. And you're like, okay, I'm going to have to do some of the old stuff. And then you're like, I don't remember it. I really struggled the first couple times. I had merch that was a joke and I couldn't remember the joke. And I was like, I have to do the joke because I have to sell the merch. So I'm like trying to, and I like went back like 3 times and I was like, finally I got it. And they were just like, what is happening to her?
I've seen Gary Goldman a few times here in town and who's great.
Yeah.
And we saw him tell one bit a few times, like in each of the sets. And it was really interesting to see a stand-up, especially of his caliber, repeat jokes and still get laughs from me, like to be able to still finesse it in such a way that it works for me each time. That is a hell of a skill to have.
That is so funny because, I end up working with some of the same people a lot and sometimes pretty close together. And there's a few people where I'm like, I could watch you over and over. I know what's happening. It's like listening to your favorite song or something. You know the words, but you love it. And then some people I'm like, oh, he's up. I'm going to go outside then. Like I don't need to watch it. And what makes that different? Like Gary Goldman's one of those people. Like I could watch his specials over and over.
Yeah, he's great. We're going to get to see him next week.
Awesome.
Which will be our first live in-person stand-up show since COVID. I mean, in over a year and a half.
That's so exciting. Probably. I'm excited for you because now I've been live again since like February. So I'm like, oh, these people who haven't gotten to go yet, they're still new.
Oh yeah. I mean here, because it's New York, the vaccine wasn't readily available, and there's so many people, so it's
so many more people,
spread stuff. So it wasn't until this month. No, it's like it's not even yet.
I was gonna say I knew you guys were opening up, but
right as we are talking, it is not fully opened up yet. There are places that are doing a little bit, but not much.
Yeah, we've had. I think we're still at a limited capacity over here, but at the end of this month, it's supposed to be back to normal. It is funny because, Washington State, at least Western Washington, is liberal. They want to say that they're liberal, whatever, even though they're all rich as fuck. But so now, just recently, on a lot of the stores and stuff, it says you can wear a mask, or if you're fully vaccinated, you don't have to wear one. And you go in the store and everyone still has their mask on because I think they're afraid that people will think they're anti-maskers, or they're like, I'm vaccinated. I'm not.
Right. We are in that time
against a mask.
Like, because 90% of the people I saw, honestly, 99% of the people I saw in New York when all this was going on were wearing a mask, and I would have to go out a ton. I have to go walk to the bodega a bunch to see 5 people not wearing a mask in a week. Yeah. Like. That was how much people were wearing masks here, which is great. But now there's a lot under the chin stuff and things, and it's like
getting a little
when I first started seeing that, I was like, okay, don't be alarmed by this person not wearing a mask. They are probably fully vaxxed.
Right. It's a weird, okay. So when I first started doing shows again, because even some of the places it was allowed, I just, about 8 months where I didn't fly, I didn't go out of state, I didn't do anything. And Washington was closed all the way. So it was mostly online. And then, so when we opened a little bit in February, like 25% capacity, then I was like, okay, well, I'll go do, Idaho and Oregon or whoever's open, Montana, whatever. And so I did my first few shows on the road in March in Idaho. And I was the only one wearing a mask. Me and my feature were the only 2 people wearing a mask anywhere. And then we go into the venue and we look they just stare at you like you're crazy. And you're like,
Yeah.
okay. And then I go and sit down. I know the owner. And so he sits down. He's like, oh, just so you know, like the masks are optional. And I was like, oh, I can tell. Like that's not. But we wore them anyways. And then, of course,
Yeah. I mean,
my
that's
feature's a
the
little
place to
neurotic.
wear it.
And he was like, I have it. I know I have it. We got it. We got it. And then he got tested immediately. And we didn't get it.
Yeah, you're wearing a mask, you know.
Yeah, we were wearing a mask. I mean, I'm sure. Well, and they were all like, we've already had it, which is a weird way to go, but whatever.
I don't understand those people who are like, well, I've already had it, so why like you can get it again.
Right.
And maybe it will be worse. Like, why are you being cavalier about your health?
An interesting experience for sure. But yeah, so now it just kind of depends. Well, and then of course I'm like ready for everywhere I traveled to be like that. So April was when I was like, okay, I'm flying again. I had one shot at that time. I'm fully vaxxed now, but and I went to Oklahoma thinking like, okay, this is what we've heard on TV. The South's not into the mask thing. Like, we'll see what happens. And I go, and they were really good about it. They kept them on. They didn't, they didn't really argue about it. And so I like had no idea what I was in for every time I'm going anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. There's something I'm noticing, and because I've seen a few of the clubs here and venues here offering shows, live shows, but they are doing like a 2-tier thing, I guess, where it's like if it's live, then you can pay $12-15 to see the show, or we're gonna live stream it for $5. I hope they do that forever.
Yeah, I could see
what I could see a lot of comics saying like, I don't want it live streamed because I guess someone could steal it, and maybe there's some way to like get around that, but I think it's good for the venues if they can make money beyond who's in the house, because you can sell out and then make more money.
Yeah, and I feel like, because I just recently did one in Central Washington where they had like 3 cameras. It was in this like church that they turned into a theater, and then it was live streamed also, and people could donate that way, and so it ends up sometimes being more money for us too, which is nice. I mean, in the very beginning of this, that was how I kept my house, I mean, I did these like live stream shows where I was just like, you just donate whatever you want. And it worked really well for the beginning part until it got, pretty saturated of other people doing it too. But that was, I mean, so I'm still trying to figure out how to keep some parts of that afloat. I've been doing live stream trivia on my YouTube, just whatever. Because it is a way to keep people engaged that otherwise might forget about you because you don't travel to, Ohio in the middle of nowhere all the time. Things like that where they can still be involved.
Right.
How often? I mean, I haven't gone back to the South, like Georgia and stuff for 3 years. So there could be people who really liked me when I was there that hopefully still follow me and are like, well, at least I can see something she's doing, or whatever.
Yeah. If you're doing a live show at a club and they're offering the live stream as well, like you got, there are options and we can adapt to them, like you're talking about.
I don't hate that, especially if you're selling the club out. It's like,
people from all over the world can also watch it who never would have access because they don't live in that town.
Yeah, it's
And people will still go to the shows because people like live performance.
And it's still a different experience. Even if you're seeing the exact same show, it's still, that atmosphere is still different. And I think people who are actually fans of stand-up understand that.
Yeah.
But why not? I mean, we're going to have to get some parts of it. I mean, I focused, I say it like I chose, you pick an airline and then you're like, okay, I'm in Alaska. I'm a Delta person, whatever. I got to get my status and stuff. So during COVID, I picked YouTube. That was the one I was going to focus on, and really created a lot more content, did a lot of live streams and stuff, got the subscribers up, whatever. It's monetized now. And now I'm like, why didn't I do this before? Like I made all these adjustments just for this to make it work. But I'm like, oh, I could have been doing this before and that would have been helpful. And so I think we've learned a ton. And I do hope that we take parts of it that are going to help and keep doing them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it would be really great if even improv theaters can do that, because you have so many people who move to a big city to do improv, and their friends and family back home want to see them perform, but they don't live in the city they live.
And that might be better for improv too, because it's not, it's not your material you're putting out there. That's what stand-ups are afraid of, getting their material out there, and people have it before they should. But improv, it's like, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, there's different, there are different options, and I hope clubs can recoup some of that money they lost this last year with also doing a live stream for live in-house shows. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I'm for it.
Yeah. Well, this has been a great chat. I don't want to end before we talk about some of the other stuff that you've been doing, like you have, was it 80 for 80?
80 for 80, yeah.
That's a video thing that you put together, like is it a documentary? Is that fair to call it a documentary series?
Yeah, it's a documentary series where I talk to people over the age of 80.
For 80 minutes, I guess? Is that what it is?
No. It might be a total of 80 minutes. No, they're pretty short episodes. You get about 45 minutes with someone who's over 80 before they're like, I have to leave.
Right.
It was really fun. It was a few years ago, and I made it in Seattle. I got a grant to make it. I'm Monica Nevi. We've been told our whole lives to listen to our elders, and now you're going to have to. This is 80 for 80.
One pitch to Edgar Martinez. Now swung on line into the gap in right center field. Left to the store, run to the wall, away the wall. Edgar Martinez is back and get it and tomahawk it. Get on that magic carpet and score, baby. Ed, can you believe it?
Dope.
It was on Amazon, and now it's on YouTube, so you can watch it just easily on my YouTube. And yeah, it's funny. They say whatever they want. There was a reason I picked that age range, was that they're past the sugar coating point of trying to make everything sound like it's great. I wanted some real answers, and they give them to you for sure. So yeah, there's different episodes. They all have a different story. I had a couple who'd been married for 60 years. So I asked her what the key to a long marriage was, and she said, just don't talk to each other. So, they just say whatever they want.
So many people divorced during COVID because they were around each other
because they had to interact. Yeah.
than they ever thought they would be.
Exactly.
We packed a few years into this last year.
Oh, yeah. If you've been together, if you stayed together during this time, like you're at least 5, I think.
Oh, for sure. Gosh, I mean, just the amount of time that you spent is just not the normal amount of time that you spend with your significant others for the average person.
Or your kids.
Sure. I mean, it's like 8 hours a day that people weren't spending time together in most cases.
Well, yeah, and me even more because I was traveling. So now it's like, which I think was actually good for my relationship because I was gone a lot. But, if you weren't prepared for that, then...
And you also have a podcast called Hug Life. That you've been doing. You have over 300 episodes, correct?
Yeah, I think it's like 340 now. What is that? Almost 7 years, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, me and my co-host Mike Coletta, who also did that tour with me. It's a positive podcast. We talk about nice stuff and good news stories, and it's just fun and funny. And the whole idea was just that everything's pretty stressful if you're watching how the world's going, and you can just forget for an hour or whatever.
That's nice.
Which, at the time was like, oh, that's nice. And now you're like, oh, it makes even more sense.
Yeah, you started that way before COVID.
Yeah, definitely.
Is that, because you say that's the person you toured with, is that the sort of vibe that you all do with your shows, your live shows? Where it's like, let's just enjoy, or do you get into some more of the negative?
I think my natural thing is like, I just want everyone to laugh. And, it's not necessarily the material itself is super upbeat or positive, but it's not political. I don't really talk, it's not too dark. It's just, I just want it to be funny and normal observation.
Like if I was going to have multiple children, I would ask for C-sections, right? Then I would ask for separate scars so they look like abs. You know what I mean? If there are any parents out there, your kids are dumb. And could be your fault, could be mine. It's probably yours. It's getting worse though, right? I watched a 5th grader, so he's got to be 11, looking at a magazine, and he tried to touch the corner to change the page. You're gonna let that kid make his own chicken nuggets? All right. And I didn't know what to do, like I'd never seen that before. Right, so I just kind of saw it, and I stood up, and I walked over to my desk, and I tried to figure out how to tie my own tubes with a stapler.
And Mike's like that too. He's got a very like upbeat voice too. So you're just like, oh, we're having fun.
Because like I've heard of like the angry sports dad in high school, or like the get on you about your grades dad in high school. But what kind of shit luck do you have to get the angry video game nerd dad? That's like the worst one, right? He's beating you at Dance Dance Revolution at your own birthday party. He's like, oh, right, left, now, show some fucking integrity.
Which I really enjoy someone who can do something political and things like that. That's just not necessarily my lane. And so, yeah, I just want people to forget for a little bit. I mean, I've had those experiences where, something terrible is happening for somebody and they come up to you after a show and they go, thank you. I needed to just not think about it for a little bit. And so just to be able to do that is huge. And that's kind of but that's just what I write about anyways. I've tried sometimes to be like, okay, what could I write about what's going on? And it just doesn't go as well for me. So it's more of a what's happened to me, my firsthand experience, my family, my jobs, things like that. That's just what I create from. So that's how it works out.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, we've reached the end of the episode. And it's time to create something together. And one thing that has piqued my interest, you mentioned that you got a grant for the documentary series. And I'm wondering, because I think a lot of people are trying to figure out ways to make a project that they have ideas for. How did you go about getting a grant to get that financed? Like, how did that whole thing come about?
Well, it's funny. There's so many other things that I could pitch and be annoying.
So we can talk about if walking through how to get a grant is not the direction that you.
No, that's totally fine.
Oh, cool.
No, that works. But so this last year I put out 2 albums. So one was a stand-up album, normal. It's called Mostly Finger Guns, recorded live, like every other album you've heard.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then a second one that's called Chill, which is a guided meditation album.
Yes.
But it's like comedic guided meditation. And so years ago, probably 6 years ago, I recorded a guided meditation it's like full of dick jokes. Like it's relaxing and stuff, but it's just jokes, or whatever. It works. It's effective, but it's also
it sounds great.
Dirty. I don't even know how else to explain it. And so I had I had no idea what I was doing editing wise. And so I just put up pictures and, I put it on YouTube, but put up pictures and so it was bad. And so a guy who had been doing a documentary about the competition here in Seattle International Comedy Competition, the year that I had done it, he reached out and was like, hey, do you want me to edit a video for you? Because this is not good. And I was like, yeah, that'd be great. So then I started doing them monthly and he would do a video with stock footage, which was great. They're so funny because stock footage is hilarious to me. I think it's so great.
It's inherently funny.
We did that for maybe a year. And then I had this idea of my grandfather passed away. And so I just feel like I had questions for him, that I couldn't at that point get answered. And I wanted to know how he felt about his life and just things like that. So I had the idea of well, what if we interview them now, and then make them feel comfortable and we'll talk about silly, dirty stuff and, whatever. And so I had told Ruben, who was the guy who was editing these other things for me, I was like, I want it to look good though. I'd want, that would take money to do, thinking okay, I'll just keep it in my back pocket just in case. And he was the one that was like, oh, there's a lot of arts organizations around that do that. And like the one here that I went through, it's called For Culture, like the number 4. And they get their money from lodging taxes, like when you go to a hotel, which is cool, I think. And so I applied for it. He helped me a bit, and I didn't expect to get it at all. And then we did, because I think they hadn't really, there's not a lot of comedy focused things that they got. It was a lot of like music festivals or a mural or something, like more art, like when you think of art kind of things. And so this was different, and they liked it a lot. And so, yeah, they gave me the money, and I actually made it within like 3 months of them giving us the grant. And they were like, whoa, that was fast. But because I think other people, they're like, you have 2 years to use the money, and I did it in like 3 months. But you had to do another, like you had to have an event. So we did like a premiere, there was more parts to it, but I didn't even, I don't know. You have to like fit certain criteria for it. And does it help the community? And does it, all these different things that I kind of had to be, you just look at it and go, okay, I can make it sound like it does,
And once you made it and then got it on Amazon Prime, like what was that process? How did you get that to work for you?
They were going in a direction of like, we want more self-produced made stuff. I don't know if they were trying to compete with like a YouTube or something, or just that Netflix had so much content, but they were like, you can submit it to us. And it was actually a really long process. It went back and forth. And then we had like a date that it was supposed to come out, and they didn't put it up until like 3 days later. And I was like devastated. I had done all this PR. I was like on the news, like it's going to be out this day. And then they messed it up. And so I'm on the road sitting at a bar, just with my sunglasses on, crying alone in the corner, like, oh God, why didn't this work out? But then it went up and it was fine. But as we've heard in the news, Amazon's an interesting company financially. So now it actually works out better for me financially to have it on YouTube. So, but I made, we were able to pay for it. I actually ended up getting 2 grants.
Oh, cool.
And so it wasn't like I lost a bunch of money to make it, but it was a great experience. And we cut a lot of corners financially because we were around here. We filmed everything in one day, which was tiring for me, but each episode, they only came in for 45 minutes. So they were okay. But I got really lucky with the people that I worked with, and then that this company wanted it. So there's like a lot more things like that than people know about, I think. Because if he hadn't told me, I wouldn't even have known that was an option. So
and then a lot of people just think, well, I guess I'll go to Kickstarter.
Right.
And then you have to basically ask your friends, because like who else is there to ask to support that?
We did try and do that for a second season, and it did not go well. Not because I think it wasn't like a good idea, but we had to ask for a lot more money. And it just, Kickstarter didn't work for me.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. I mean, a lot of stand-ups or comedians in general will go that route, but they're asking their broke friends for money, essentially. You know? And
for sure.
Great to be able to help your friends with something and to support their endeavors, but it just can't always work. I mean, you need people who finance things to put money into something, but a grant is a good way to go, because a lot of people with a lot of money who finance things also want creative control or say, and that's one of the things that hurts the film industry, is that there are just a lot of investors, and then they want to pull a writer aside and be like, this is how you do this. And it's like, you are a finance pro. You don't know anything
There's
about
a reason
film.
I'm writing it,
Right. So it's that could be a mess. And so if someone can go the grant route, then that's great.
Absolutely. Or any way that you can then it changed everything for me to do that because I did have creative control of something that I had never done before. So I was lucky enough we also had a director. So Ruben helped me with it. He did the editing and the camera and stuff. And then I had a director named Richard Kilpatrick who did a lot of commercials for like Microsoft and different things like that, and had reached out randomly to be like, oh, I like your Instagram, like dumb Instagram videos. Do you want, maybe we should do something together? And I was like, interesting timing. I actually have this big project that I have money for. And, do you want to help me? And they both knew exactly what I was going for because I wanted it to, 80 for 80. I wanted it to be like a sports kind of, like intensity of a sports documentary, but it's about old people. Like it's, it's silly. And so they both nailed it. Like they got it perfect. And that made a huge difference. Like I just got pretty lucky in a lot of ways for that. But I think the biggest thing, like I have struggled with confidence, always have, even as a basketball player. Like if I could just be confident in the things that I'm creating and whatnot, like it would help. And I think that helped me a lot of like, oh, I can create something that I thought of, that I like, that somebody wanted to give me money for, that looks really good and I'm proud of. And people, like, for the most part, it wasn't some like huge blew up. I didn't win an Academy Award for it, but it was
dope that you put
I'm
it
proud
together.
of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, yeah, it's great to have those sort of accolades if you can get like an Academy Award or something, I suppose, because that helps get your name out there. And
but I would want that just so people had to say it before I came on stage. An Academy Award probably wouldn't help me as much as somebody else. It'd be like, your next comic has an Academy Award.
Yeah, I mean, it helps point to the project, but not necessarily being a road comic. But I don't know. I mean, that sounds good.
I mean, it probably wouldn't hurt.
It would definitely help, at least for that first year, that you can make a big gag out of it. But you're so accomplished, and it's interesting to hear that you struggle with doubt and being more secure about yourself.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because I've had some good things happen. I've done, gotten accepted to different festivals and stuff. And I still don't ask enough because I'm afraid. I'm still afraid of getting rejected. And like even booking, I think that wears on me sometimes, like just booking comedy clubs where I'm like, I work this other club. I know I would be good at this club. I just need them to say yes. And sometimes they don't, or they don't respond at all. And it's just after a while, it's like a bit, it gets heavy. And so then I'm like, oh, I should send this tape in. I should write this thing. I should ask for this. And I just get afraid. I just get, and eventually I do it. And that's kind of what I'm saying about 80 for 80 is like, just do it. It'll probably work out. The worst thing is that they say no, that's it. It just takes me a lot longer because I do sit here and think about it and second guess and overanalyze. And I wish we've both seen just blind confidence in some of these people we work with. And you're like, God, I know he sucks, but I really wish I had that confidence.
I know, for sure. Well, I think it's really inspiring that you have come through that stuff to create all of the things that you've done and to build the career that you've built. And I appreciate you sharing that with us because I think a lot of people listening, myself included, are hearing that just makes us more inspired. Like, if she can fight through that, then so can I.
Good. Well, I hope that's how you feel. And yeah, there's a lot of like, just take a shot and see what happens. And yeah, and I think with most things, if you don't get it, you're still in the same position. Nothing's going to make you go backwards. So you'll be okay. And for me, like making 80 for 80 really led to the confidence to make a meditation album. Like who would, like that's what a weird thing to do. But now I knew how to pay for stuff and knew how to make it good. So you're at least at the very least taking a chance to try something. You'll learn something. I feel like I sound like your third grade teacher, but still, like I believe in you. You can do it.
All right. Well, there it is. thanks so much for being on the podcast, Monica.
Thanks so much for having me. I had fun.
She was so much fun to talk to. Loved having her on. Be sure to check out other stuff she's got going on. Get her 2 albums, the stand-up album Mostly Finger Guns and the guided meditation Chill. She also has a newer podcast out called Dumb Pitches. Don't forget about her other podcast, Hug Life, and follow her on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Monica Nevi. We have all sorts of links in the bio for her stuff, so be sure to check that out. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at There It Is Pod, and on YouTube at There It Is. Also subscribe to our Comedy Lifestyle newsletter and support us if you can. We have a Patreon and a PayPal. Go to thereitispod.com for newsletter and support info. Very much appreciate it. Until next time, be good to each other.
The music for the theme song was created by Neil Brooks. The rap was written and performed by Nick Acevedo. The logo for There It Is was created by Jeff Prater. The There It Is podcast is produced by Jason Farr.